Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolowski, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Okay, so let's play 20 questions. Well, maybe not 20. How about 3? Okay, be ready to answer. Here we go. What is the most irreverent airline that was run by a fun-loving jokester? That's 1. 2, what airline treats passengers like cattle and they love it? And 3, what airline encourages flight attendants to sing in rap the flight regulations for the trip? I think you guessed it. Southwest Airlines, right? Well, that airline was started in 1967 by a scrappy lawyer named Herb Kelleher and a businessman named Roland King. And they just defied the industry. They did it right. I found a woman today that I'm so thrilled to be on the show for 2 reasons. First of all, Rita Bailey was there for 25 years and now has started something incredible in her second journey. So, Rita, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
25 years.
25 years. I was only 6 or 7. Yeah.
I find myself saying that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so a little bit about you that I can brag and you can tell me more about. You not only were there for 25 years, but you had a lot of different roles, and one of them was director of the University for People. Didn't you start their university?
So before I became the director, it was a training group with a small, maybe 4 or 5 people.
Uh-huh.
And so when I came into that position, I had the opportunity to create what was then in vogue, universities, corporate universities.
Corporate universities.
So we basically went from 3, 4 people to 36 6 years later. So it was an exciting time. It really was.
Well, when you were there, whether it was during that time or any time, what was, in the roles that you did have, what was your favorite role there?
I would say, well, it's hard because they each had, I learned so much. The 2 I would say was marketing. I was in marketing for 12 years there. And I moved through the ranks from a sales representative going out and making calls and convincing people they should fly Southwest to,
Back then.
So I worked my way up to the director of sales and marketing. And that was exciting because obviously we were working with the external customers and promoting Southwest, and it was just fun. And then the University for People. I mean, to have the opportunity to grow something and build it from virtually the ground up. And it was brick and mortar. We acquired, remember when Braniff Airlines? People probably don't even remember that name.
I remember Braniff.
But they, the old hangar that was there, or their terminal, it was dormant for years. And so we took it over with the hopes or with the intent that later it would become gate space for Southwest, which it is now. However, when we got it, it was abandoned and just nothing. I mean, it looked like something out of an old horror movie. Really? 40,000 square feet. And to be given the opportunity to say, transform this into a university for our employees was just an amazing, amazing thing.
When was this?
So that was around 1995, 96.
So that's when, as you said, corporate universities were becoming thin. Now all companies have their corporate universities.
Right.
What was the biggest challenge in doing that for you?
So it was aligning it with the culture so that our employees knew that this was for them. And that's why we called it the University for People.
That's different.
Not of.
Yeah.
The name of our HR department had been changed by then our VP of HR, Ann Rhodes, who came in and had a whole different idea about what HR should be. And she changed the name to the People Department. And so the university was part of the People Department, so we called it the University for People.
Weren't you the first company that I just remembered that I heard, okay, HR is the People Department.
We were one of the first. I think maybe FedEx had that concept as well. But,
interesting.
We were one of the pioneers and the one that stuck.
That's so fascinating. You know, you know this, I wrote for 10 years for the Southwest Airlines magazine. And Rita, during that time when I met some of the executives, including you, I always heard stories, not only from the leaders there, about Herb Kelleher, the Herb Kelleher stories, but also from flight attendants when I flew Southwest, still do, and for employees. I'm curious, what's your story? What's your Herb Kelleher story?
Well, there's some I probably can't share.
Give us one you can.
I remember when we opened Las Vegas. When I was in sales and marketing, we would go into a new market and do what we called a blitz. And that was to just, let everybody know we were there. And so Herb was with us on that trip. And I remember at the airport, he was always so helpful. He wanted to pick up our luggage and
A gentleman.
But he picked up our luggage. The luggage didn't make it to the hotel. And so Herb is like delivering luggage to our rooms, as it came in because it had been misplaced somehow. So it was always a fun time with Herb, always.
And he never was beyond what I know about him and from many stories, is that he was never beyond rolling his sleeves up,
never
schlucking the luggage, or serving breakfast at one of your hubs and so forth. And
he definitely, I think he was the consummate leader because he modeled what leadership should be. So many organizations, and I'm sure you have this too, they'll say people are our most valuable asset. One, I don't think we're an asset. I mean, I don't think people are owned, but I know the intent behind that is that our people are the most important thing. But unfortunately, when you get into some of these organizations, you find that that's not the case. It's more the PR or what they want people to believe, but people don't have that experience. And people believe what they experience.
That's true.
Not what you tell them. And I can honestly say for the 25 years I was with Southwest, and even now, because I'm still a loyal customer, the experience was amazing. And it was
great.
genuine. It was authentic.
It was real.
It was real.
Authentic.
It was real. And I think it's because of the leadership. It personified his personality.
Boy, it really did. We miss him terribly.
Yes, we do.
But we've still got Southwest, and we're both still reading it. I was curious, one more question about Southwest, then I want to hear about what you're doing now. In the tours that you had where companies from all over the world, Rita, would come and just see what was going on. And I remember Colleen Barrett was so gracious in allowing me to come when I was writing for the magazine. And what she showed me was all along the walls were all these pictures. And she pointed out that these pictures were from different departments, but anyone could just plop a picture up there or take it down, and so you might walk by Department A, and here's a whole bunch of pictures, but the next time you walked by Department A, they would be changed. Somebody had a baby, they put their baby up, and so forth. And I never forgot that because I thought, now that's real. That's real.
Absolutely.
And so when companies from different parts of the world would come over and see the culture and feel it and touch it and go through the tours, do you know if any company, and if they did, what did companies do? What did they take back and actually implement?
I remember specifically, because we had thousands of people come over about 4 or 5 years, that we would have what we refer to as culture days.
Culture days.
Yes. And we at the university would host those. And we'd have upwards of 250 plus people come every quarter. It was amazing. And we didn't advertise or solicit this. It was strictly word of mouth. And there were people from all over, but there was one in particular that I remember because I built a longer-term relationship with them. And at the time, he was with a upstart company called What If, and they were from the UK. And he was fascinated by the culture and the fact that we were one of the best companies to work for, and he was trying to identify companies in the U.S. that met that criteria. And so as a result of him coming, he started bringing European companies to the U.S., and Southwest was his premier company that he would always tour. And this was prior to 9/11, when it was a little more open to come in and do those tours. But as a result, those companies, multiple companies from the UK, would go back and implement the people practices because they saw that it was authentic. And the UK is not known for being people-centric in the same sense as America, because oftentimes you would hear, well, you can do that in America, but we can't do that in the UK. And they were out to prove, the people who came on this tour were out to prove that that wasn't so. People are people. And
Isn't
they
that
really
true?
genuinely, they want the same thing. They want to feel valued. They want to know that they have the opportunity for growth. They want to know that they matter and they have a voice.
Sure.
And it's really that simple. I remember Colleen once saying to someone who asked her a question, because they were really pushing her on metrics and, well, how do you measure this and how do you know? And she took a long draw of her cigarette and she said, we just know. And it was primarily because we were so involved and we walked around and we were close to our people. And so we didn't have to do a lot of metrics in order to find out if it was working. It works when you care about people and you show them. Like our freedom campaign was around giving our customers the freedom to fly, to go, to see, to do. But the internal campaign was freedom begins with you. And so that really captures the essence of what,
Begins with you.
It begins with you.
And for those who may or may not know, Colleen Barrett and Herb were like just joined at the hip. She was his secretary when it first started, and they
later became president.
And later be emeritus.
Yes, and now she's president emeritus. And
yes.
Still
involved.
Still involved, yes.
Yes. Well, it was a wonderful culture. Now,
and it still is.
And it still is, yes, is a wonderful culture. So, how did you go from that? First of all, why did you leave?
Well, 25 years. And, it's a hard decision because over time, at the time I had 3 grandchildren, and my mother was starting to, her health was starting to fail.
Oh.
I was in a new relationship. And 25 years, I was able to leave with my flight benefits and with the party.
Nice.
And you just sort of know when it's time to move. And I think sometimes people hold on to something too long. And there were people there who were what I call institutionalized, that when it becomes your entire life, it's like there is nothing else other than this organization. And that a lot of people are in that situation now. And so I just thought it's time. And if I'm going to do anything else or spend time with my grandchildren, with my family, that this would be a good time to do it. And leave at the top of your game, right? The university was doing well. We had a wonderful staff. As a matter of fact, Elizabeth Bryant, who was hired as one of our facilitators, is now running the corporate university, and she's a vice president. So it's just great to see people who, have grown up and had the opportunity to continue to develop and carry on what we started. So
blessed, very
yes,
blessed.
Very
You were blessed.
Yes.
So I always ask you to leave your teachable points of view, and that's one of them. Leave at the top of your game. Is that what you said?
Yes.
And be ready to move on when you know it's time to move on.
Yes.
So that leads to
What did I do?
are you doing now?
Well, I had the thought that I would retire, and I have since sort of put that word aside because
Rewire, not retire.
I don't know many people who retire truly and do nothing. And so I really didn't know what I was going to do. And my Henry kept saying, it's not so much about what you want to do, but it's how you want to be. And
I like that.
it took me about 5 years. Okay, so I'm a slow learner in some cases.
Well, you probably relaxed a little bit too in between.
I try to, but it's hard when you've been doing all your life.
Sure.
And we tend to gravitate toward those things we're comfortable with. And it's like, well, I can do speaking, I can do marketing, I can do. And he kept saying, how do you want your life to be? And it just took me a while to settle, because when you think about it, we are human beings, not doings. And so over time, I thought, well, I don't know. So I'm going to experiment, I'm going to spend the time with family, with friends, but I'm also going to step out of my comfort zone because I was somewhat insulated within this Southwest bubble, and I wanted to get out and explore. So and it's when you're in flow, things just sort of come to you. So I had the opportunity to co-author a book called Destination Profit with a colleague.
Is it still out there?
It's still out there.
Destination
yes.
Profit. Okay.
Destination Profit. And then I started being asked by people that I knew externally who had come to our culture days if I would come and speak to their company. Because there was this sort of a thought of, I want to be the next Southwest Airlines of, you fill in the blank, right? Banking, technology, whatever the company is. And I guess I took for granted what I had experienced, because to me it was a way of life. But to others who were looking in, they thought, oh my gosh, how do you do that? So I went out on the speaking circuit, and I did mainly keynotes to start. But as a result of that, people would say, well, that's all great, but how do you do this? How do you make it happen?
Show us.
So then, of course, the consulting, right?
Yeah.
And then following the coaching and workshops and it just sort of happened organically. And it was across all genres. I've worked with nonprofit, government, education, for-profit, because it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
People are people, right?
That's right.
And regardless of the organization, they basically still want the same thing. They want to set themselves apart. And when you think about it, price doesn't really set you apart. We could have competed at Southwest on price. We could have competed. I mean, an airplane is an airplane, right? A lot of people fly 737s. But it was the people. And I know that sounds cliche, but it really...
No, it's true.
It really is the people who make the difference. And how you treat those people will determine how they treat your customers. And so that's ingrained in me. I find myself, even when I travel, and you may do this too, I'm always critiquing, the level of service. And,
Yes.
and I'm asking that waitress or that person behind the desk or that bellhop, what do you like about working here? How do they treat you? And what's really amazing is people tell you the truth.
They do.
And you can pretty much tell how they are being treated by the level of service they're giving. So it's been fascinating. I am fascinated by people in general and people of all cultures. I've traveled to probably almost 40 countries now.
Oh, my goodness.
Had that opportunity, and I never thought this little girl from St. Louis, Missouri would have the opportunity to
Isn't that great that you can do that?
Yeah, see and do amazing things and with amazing people.
Well, so how are you taking that now to this next level of a business called?
Up to something.
I love that. Up to something.
Up to something.
How did you come up with that name, and what is it?
Well, I'll give you the quick story. I was invited several years back by a friend of mine to join a small group of 10, 12 people, and they were calling themselves the Up to Something group, primarily because they would just get together every month and talk about what they were up to. And I thought, well, that's kind of fun. But, we're so used to labeling things like, well, is this a mastermind group? Or is this, what type of group and what are we going to learn? And they were like, no, we're just going to talk. And whatever you want to talk about, if you want to talk. And it's just about what you're up to. So fast forward, she looked at me one day, several years into it. I'd been in the group probably about 10 years. And she said, so many people are curious about this and they want to know more and how they can start an Up to Something group. So why don't we make this a business? And so my dear friend Dottie Gandy and I, we did. We actually formalized it into a partnership business and started doing workshops and interviewing people and started even writing a book about it. And when her husband then had Alzheimer's, she said, I need to become a full-time caregiver. And so I took on the business, and Up to Something's been kind of growing up. It's been trying to decide what it wanted to be. And it's interesting because Up to Something is so nebulous anyway. And so, but where we've landed is, and it always has been around helping people illuminate their message and share their passion with the world of what is important to them. It's that thing you must do. You cannot not do it. And when you find that, it's like gold, right? When you just know in your heart, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So that's how we define an Up to Something person, because everybody's up to something, but not always up to something good, right? So this is about following your passion, and you would be an Up to Something person. You are definitely doing it right, because for the years that I've known of you and known you, it's been about following that passion. So the Up to Something, we are transitioning and transforming now into a platform, audio-visual platform for people to share their messages. And so we're starting it with two podcasts that are launching this week, as a matter of fact. This very week. So here,
congratulations.
First announcement. The first one is a passion of mine, and it's about being a grandparent. I have 4 extraordinary grandchildren that I'm very proud of, and people love to talk about their grandchildren.
So you can have grandmothers on, grandfathers on.
Grandmothers, grandfathers, parents talking about their parents who are their grandparents. And it's called Grand Chronicles.
Grand Chronicles. That resonates just really quickly so much for me, because I was raised by a grandmother. I didn't have parents. I, of course, had parents, but they didn't raise me. My grandmother raised me until she passed when I was 11. And those early years, I mean, you talk about having stories.
Yes.
That's I love that one. What's the other one?
We'll have to have you on the show.
I would love to talk about that. You bet.
And the other one is called Life Disrupted. Now, go figure, right?
What's that about?
Is there anyone out there who could not think of a time where their life hasn't been disrupted?
Goodness, yes.
And it's usually, we think of it in terms of what's happened to us, right? Our circumstances. Sure. We lost that job. We lost a loved one. The children left, to go off. Negative. Disruption has a negative connotation. But we also hear disruption now in the media. It's in the media a lot, right? Because of the Airbnbs and the Ubers and these companies that have disrupted themselves and disrupted industries. And so we as individuals, why can't we disrupt ourselves? And
Great concept.
so it doesn't have to be negative. I think when you're stuck or when you know that it's time to move on, it's time to disrupt. And it doesn't have to be some major, chaotic, negative thing. It can just be small moves, but things that will move you forward.
Give me an example, Rita.
So I was listening to a gentleman who was doing a webinar recently, and he talked about wanting to have a certain position. He wanted to be a managing director, and that he went to school for it. He studied, he did all the right things on his job, and he kept getting passed over for promotions. But when they offered him the opportunity for this title, it required a relocation. And he kept resisting that. And because he didn't want to uproot his family, take them out of school, they love their community and so forth. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who can relate to that.
You bet.
He finally decided one day, maybe I'm getting what I asked for. I'm just the block, right? So he decided to make the move and ended up in Louisville, Kentucky, and uprooted his family and got the title. And he said it was the best move that he ever made because it was, his children were flourishing in school. His wife didn't have to work anymore. And he loved his job. They had a great community. And how many people are missing their blessings because they have their plan?
Their plan.
Their plan.
Life
right?
looks like this.
Yes.
Not really, not always.
Exactly. And I think that, it's important to have goals and to have a plan. But I think we also have to know when it feels hard, you usually are not in flow.
That's another point of view. When it feels hard, you're usually not in flow. I have to think about that.
Yeah, because I think if we all think back to the things that have happened that were life-changing for us, that even though it may have not been easy, it didn't feel like we were pushing the rock uphill. You didn't take that 2 steps forward to take 5 back. It just felt like you were steadily moving forward, or something was pulling you into it. Even though you might fear it, it felt right. It just felt right. And so I think if we really reflect and we focus, we can see that. But sometimes we're so clouded by our own self-talk, our own judgment of ourselves, or what other people say or think, that we miss the opportunities. I've always said I want to live my life with no missed opportunities and no regrets. How many people on their deathbed, or they know someone who has,
I wish I did.
I wish I had done it. I wish I had done it. And I just never wanted to be that person. I thought, live it now, even though it might be scary, do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Rita, there's on that note, there's a book that I read not long ago called What If? And it's all about that. What if, then what kind of thing. So I get that. I totally get that. So what else, in closing, what else can you share from your life's experiences that might be wisdom, additional wisdom?
There are 2 things that I like to think about. And one is because I do think fear is paralyzing. And most people that we talk to, they want certain things, and really the only thing stopping them is themselves. And so we can make excuses for all the other reasons that we are not stepping into that opportunity, but it really comes down to our own personal fear. So I challenge people and I ask, if you were just 20% bolder, just 20%, the 80-20 rule, what would be different in your life?
Rita, would you mind commenting on your title, Apostle of Freedom?
Oh, good question. Somebody
dear,
wants to know
yes,
that.
I have a dear friend that she once told me, she said, the work that you do is your ministry. And I never thought of it in that way.
Okay.
And so she said, you're like an apostle of freedom. And I said, really? And she said, because you do liberate people. You give them the opportunity, you give them truth and permission to really fully be who they are and be their best self.
Oh, Rita,
And
that's
so
lovely.
It's the first time I've actually said this publicly, because I thought it was such a neat title.
Awesome.
And, you can be author and speaker and facilitator and trainer and all those other things, but to be an apostle of freedom,
That's
bold, isn't it?
That's bold.
That's bold.
And I think what you said as a experience or wisdom, if you just did 20% more 20% bolder, what would your life be like?
Yeah.
Anything else? What about that quote we were talking about before the show started?
Oh, yeah. In my life, I've always thought, first, we go to school and we prepare ourselves and we go into the system and people pay you for what you do.
True.
It's about doing. And then as you evolve and as you gain the wisdom that we've talked about, then I think you're paid or acknowledged for what you know. And that's what we're doing here. We're sharing our knowledge. But I think there's a third level, and I think it's when you get to a point where just the essence of who you are, people pay and acknowledge you for who you are. That's Oprah status, okay? So I'm working on that. But I do think that if we have that mindset, because then you move into the legacy state of, as I leave this earthly world, what do I leave behind? What do I want people to say? And they're not going to say, well, she worked a whole lot, and who cares, right? It's who you were, how you made them feel. It's what you contributed to the world in general and to people, right?
That's so true. Rita, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you. You've left us with so many prophetic things and pieces of wisdom. All right. Give us the name again of your two podcasts that start this week.
Yes. Grand Chronicles.
Okay.
And Life Disrupted. And you'll find those on the Up to Something platform, which is uptosomething.com.
I'm sure everyone can remember Up to Something, right? I think that's just great.
Thank you, Valerie.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I will be listening to them, and I'd love to be a guest. Won't that be fun?
Thank you.
So until next time, we're also going to have a delightful guest. Next Monday, it will be a woman named Susan Posnick, who has a delightful and very different national cosmetic line, and she'll be talking about why she came up with it and how she is doing it right. So in the meantime, if you're interested in any more information about what we do in our training and development company, you can go to www.valerieandcompany.com. And when you're there, please be sure and sign up for our monthly quick, easy read newsletter called Valerie's Voice. That's www.valerieandcompany.com. Until next time, like Rita is doing so well, keep doing things right. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's Voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.